the scholars of before, because all of that was important to them. When it came to seeking knowledge, the knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah was important. And to them, this was something that they loved, and at the same time, this is something that was very, very important to them, and it's important to all of us when it comes to knowledge. And so they remembered the narrators of the ahadith. And they remembered the ahadith like how we remember Fatima or Ahmad or whoever that name was significant to us. Right? We never forget it. And the reason for that is because we deem it important. And so if you know the importance of something, then you will most likely remember it. And so to the scholars like Imam Shafi'i, rahimahullah, whenever every single hadith, every single verse, every single opinion and saying of a companion and a scholar and an opinion in fiqh, that was just as important. It's just as important it is to him as it is to us when we consider, like, you know, things that are very significant, like the names of people that we might get married to or so forth. Like, you never forget it, right? Even if you heard it only one time in your life, but because it had to do with something you deemed important, you don't forget it. And so every verse, every hadith, on all those pages that they used to read, everything was important. And so when they deemed it important, they kept it. And when you know that something is important, if you know that if something is important, then if you realize the importance of information or information that you need and so forth, you're more likely to keep it for a long time. But nowadays, sometimes when we think that we can always have access to something, we also don't memorize it because we take it for granted. I remember when I was younger, sorry about that, when I was younger, I remember that I used to remember all my cousins' phone number, all my aunts and uncles, all your friends' phone number. I don't know if you guys, maybe some of you guys didn't get to the time where we used to have, there was a time when people used to have home phones, you know that. And then when people did not have cell phones. And so you would have a list, right, next to in the kitchen with the names and so forth. But most of those numbers you would remember. Now if I lose a phone, if you lose your cell phone, you can't even call your friends. Because you're so used to it, you just push a button. Especially even the people closest to you. Because you have them on speed dial. Right, so it's quick. And so sometimes you don't remember their phone number. And if they just change their phone number, even if they're very, very important people to you, your mother, you might not even remember some of the phone numbers. I remember one time I was in a city. We went out with the brothers. We went to have dinner. And I had my phone, and you know, phones nowadays, like the battery runs out really quick, right? Especially at the end of the day. So this is at the end of the day. After we ate, I had my belongings. I had my belongings in the car that was parked in front of the restaurant, or parked in the back of the restaurant. And so I asked, who's bringing me back to the hotel? So I was going to go back. And so the brother said, no, we're going to you're going to go with such brother. So I went to that brother first, and then I remembered that I had my belongings in the back. Right? And so I said, oh, I'm going to go. I just went to pick up my belongings. When I went there, because those guys, they said I was going with the other guys, those guys left already. So when I went back to the back of the restaurant, the car was gone. They had already left. I went back to the front. They had already left when I got back because they thought I was going with the other guys. So everybody left me. I was in the city, and I didn't know anyone over there. Then I said, okay, I'm going to call them. I took out my phone and the battery died. At that moment, you know how you turn on and you hear that dying battery sound? Like you say, Allah, like what am I going to do? And so I'm at the restaurant and I have no way to contact them. Even though there are phones everywhere. There's plenty of phones. Everyone has a phone. But I don't know their numbers. I don't know any of their numbers. So I actually had to take a taxi back. You know, but I called those guys, all of them, I called them at least 20 times the whole weekend already, but I had no idea what their numbers were, or any of their numbers. So when the battery dies, so does the number. All those numbers. When you don't have your phone with you, you can't call anybody. But the point here is, why don't we remember those numbers anymore? Because we take it for granted. And we're not used to being in we're not used to memorizing things. That's why a lot of students, the students who are coming from the United States, especially from the West, they go study in Medina, and they go study sometime, in the East. What ends up happening is that a lot of them can't handle the way that people study in the East. In the East, when they read something, they memorize everything. And they're used to memorizing. When they see it, they memorize. And they see it, they memorize. Here, we just look at it and we understand. Right? For them, they memorize. And so that's why a lot of times, I remember teaching in Cambodia and Vietnam, I tell them, you guys read these 3 pages. You know, they don't read those 3 pages. When I tell them to read the 3 pages, the next day they came back memorizing those 3 pages. Like they memorized those 3 pages. I said, okay, alhamdulillah. Like, you know, I wasn't expecting them to even memorize it, but that's what they were used to. They were used to memorizing. And so, when we deem something important, it's easier for us to memorize. And when you know that something is important, and if you know that you're going to be rewarded, another thing that helps us to memorize, helps us to learn, is to realize that whatever we're doing, if we're sincere, any effort that we make, we will be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. And so when you're trying to memorize the Quran, or when you're trying to memorize the hadith, whether you're going to finish it or not, don't think that it's going to take me a long time, I'm not going to be able to, I don't know when I'm going to be finished. Don't worry about it. Because the time that you spend in trying to memorize, every single minute of it, every second of that, you're going to be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. And also, coming here, when you're spending your time here, when you're learning, every single second, every single minute, you're going to be rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. And the reward is very, very great. And that is why the scholars of before, they used to walk for weeks and months in search of one hadith. How long does it take for us to retrieve one hadith? How long does it take if we wanted to look for hadith, how long would it take for us to retrieve one hadith right now at this time? If you're in front of the computer, right, Google will say 0.0000 seconds, something like that, to get all those results, right? So you memorize certain parts, you can retrieve it, and then you find out the source of it and everything. Not that long, right? But then they used to spend weeks and months in search of one hadith. And that hadith, they might have known it already, but they want the chain, or they want to go as close as they can to have that chain to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so they would spend months and months and months, days and nights, traveling. Now you might say, why would they do such things? The reason is because they know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them for that. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا لَمَّا صَبَرُوا وَكَانُوا بِآيَاتِنَا يُوقِنُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about the ulama of Bani Israel. Allah subhanahu calls them an imma. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنْهُمْ, and we made amongst them A'imma. A'imma is the plural of imam. One imam and many a'imma. So we made them imams. يهدون بأمرنا, guided by us. لما صبروا, when they were patient. وكانوا بآياتنا يوقنون. And they were, not only were they patient, but they also were certain in our verses. In other words, they were certain and they had the yaqeen, the certainty in the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The certainty in what they were, the truth of what they were doing. The importance of what they were doing. So when they knew that, it doesn't matter how long or how much effort they have to put in to get something so small. They know the reward is so great. I want you right now, if I were to say to any one of you, let's say right here, right now, at this moment, brothers and sisters, I forgot my phone. I forgot my phone at home. I'll give you my address. Right? What I want you guys to do is I want you to walk to my house. I want you to walk to my house. Those who know where my house is. You know, it's not that close, right? It's not that far either. But for every step that you take, I will give you $10. Guaranteed. I'll give you $10 for every step that you take. Who here would not go? Right? All of us here would go. I mean, $10 for every step that you took. Now, let's say, for example, let's say my house is in, like Abu Bakr's Masjid, that area. How much money do you think you would get at the end? If I told you to leave here, even if you did not sleep, would you still have energy to do so? Because you know how much money you're getting. Imagine $10. $10 for every step that you took. In fact, if you were to walk from here, just a little bit, you hit the Grand Street, you'd probably have you have a couple $1,000 already, right? Every step. That's a lot of money, $10 for every step. But you know, $10 is nothing compared to the reward that you're going to get from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When you're taking your step, that's nothing, $10. So for us, we might not see the greatness of that reward right now, but when you have the yaqeen, when you have the iman, when you have the belief, and you know that the reward that Allah is going to give you for every step, every minute, every second that you're spending to seek knowledge sincerely for His sake, if you know that's greater than $10, and it is greater than $10, greater than $100, it's priceless, then you would have the energy and you would have the motivation to continue to do so. So anytime you feel lazy about coming to seek knowledge, about coming to a class, coming to learn, then think about the reward, the greatness of the great reward that you'll be getting from Allah. The reward, and just think about it in dunya matters. Like, okay, if it's more than $10, I would walk. This is more than $10. And Allah promises. And the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is never broken. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fulfill His promise. And so it's greater than anything in this world. The seeking of knowledge in His path. And so, before you start, another thing is you have to seek, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase you in knowledge. The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ask for more of nothing except for knowledge. And he said, وَقُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Oh my Lord, increase me in knowledge. And so, our bodies, you have to understand our bodies, the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us is abundance. It's uninnumerable. You can't even calculate how much, of the blessings of Allah. And our bodies need food in order for us to survive. The same way, our hearts, Our hearts also need food. That food that strengthens our heart is the seeking of knowledge. And the seeking of knowledge, we actually need that. You know, some of the scholars, they said that we need this knowledge of Islam, of Iman, the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala concerning the deen. We need that more than we need food and drink. You know why? Because when you have knowledge, it gives you life. And it gives you the best of this world and the hereafter. With food, you might have a lot of food, you might have a lot of wealth in this world, but if you don't have knowledge, if you don't have knowledge and good deeds, then it won't benefit you in the hereafter whatsoever. And when we're seeking knowledge, when it comes to seeking knowledge, that desire to seek knowledge is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you have the desire to seek knowledge, us coming here, just coming here, first and foremost, you have to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. Everyone needs to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we're here. Because if you thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for something, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase it for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase it for you. So anything that you have, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. So when you look at the mirror, thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're handsome. Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make you more handsome. Okay.